hate when that happens.
Yeah. I appreciate it. How you doing, man?
For the record, we weren't even live, so it really doesn't matter what we said up to that point. So thank goodness that your cameras weren't working, you weren't plugging in your iPad, and quite frankly, who knows what the hell is going on.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've been here the whole time. I've been here for a half hour waiting for you to jump online, but here you are finally jumping in at the last second again. I was like cleaning my space, figuring out where I need to go. Like this is, and then you just pop in like 30 seconds before we start. It's ridiculous. You need to recalibrate your schedule.
Well, I was reflecting this weekend. I thought, if only I started leading from where I am in a personal and an authentic way. Then I thought, wait a second, but if I'm going to do that, in order to hack leadership, I'm going to have to culturize.
Yeah, you are. That's good. We're just going to put it all in there.
What would happen if I just start from right? What if I start right now?
I said, wait, stop from right there. Stop
right now. That's
stop from where you stop what you're
doing. Then I remember, wait a second. When I went to FETC this week, I remembered, well, what is it that connected educators do differently? And then I realized, oh my God, I need a little daily inspiration, not just volume one, but volume two. And that's the show for today, Joe Sanfilippo, right there. Right there is the show for today.
The funniest part is almost everybody listening to this podcast right now is like, I don't understand any of those times.
You mean all four of them right now?
They're like, like, did he just mention all of his books? Because I've read one. I read Culturize and it was right? Or like, did Lead From Where You Are even come out yet? What is that? Is that around? Yeah, I understand. That's good. So way to drop all of the titles, yet nobody knows what you're talking about. So I think you should probably feel worse about the whole situation, to be really honest. That's just the way that it works. How you doing, boss? Good?
You know why?
Why?
Because I haven't slept.
Why? You should. You got nothing going on, man. How can you not sleep? You got no stress. What are you really doing?
I didn't say I was stressed. I said I haven't slept. There's a huge difference.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so I don't know. We had a great game last night. Kids played super hard. The girls basketball team is just rolling. They're fantastic. I love being in the gym, with everybody, just excited about the work and what the kids can do. And it's been fun to be able to get back and, just be in the space with kids. I spent a lot of time with kids yesterday, just in hallways having conversations. And I just, they're just so cool. They're so cool. It's just I love that we can get a chance to see some of the stuff that they do on a regular basis. And that's awesome. And to see coaches and teachers and everybody around, like, just leaning into their talents. Schools are special, man. But at the same time, I think this is the time of year that people get, really really anxious and really stressed and everything that goes along with it. And I was thinking about, as I was walking today, the thing that I was talking about on the walk today was the idea that we get isolated, then we get lonely, then we get depressed if we feel like we're doing it alone. And if we feel like we're the only people going through this, it makes it harder to come back every day because, as you know, you do. But like in the Midwest right now, it's dark when you get to school. It's dark when you go home. It's 4 degrees out right now, Jimmy. It's 4 degrees. Like walking across the street, my eyes are tearing up and then they're freezing by the time I get in the door. Like, that doesn't lend itself to an incredible environment for happiness. Okay. So when you're in that spot, like, I think a lot of our teachers and a lot of our staff members it's really hard to see the joy in the work when all of those external factors are kind of hitting us at the same time. And what I talked about this morning was the idea that if you don't have people that bring you along with you, or people that help you feel seen and heard and valued, it makes all of it a lot more difficult. So how are we helping each other out along that run?
Give me a second, Joe. I got to wipe the tears right now. That was so sentimental. Jesus, I thought you already quit today or something. That was your last day in the building yesterday or something.
Listen, let's see. I understand. You don't understand what it means to be in a school. I get that. So I'm just trying to tell you. I'm just trying to give you the feel for what it looks like. That's all I'm trying to do for you, Jimmy. I'm here for you. Help me help you, Jimmy Casas. For goodness sakes, man. Goodness gracious.
Hey. No, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the weekly show. Joe is just doing his 1-minute walk for us today on the weekly show. Brought a little tear to my eye. Joe, you know why that's important? Those kids,
Why?
because without them, we have no job. So that is
Also
a great tribute to them. No, in all seriousness, Joe, absolutely. And so thank you for continuing to do those 1-minute walks. Educators need those reminders today because it is, as you said, it is sometimes leadership is a lonely place, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we feel all alone, we feel isolated, we feel like a failure sometimes, and sometimes it feels like we can't do anything right. And so it's a good reminder, and that's why we do shows like this, the reminder, hey, listen, keep doing what you're doing. And what you're doing is making a difference. You know it. You see it sometimes in an email. Maybe perhaps someone drops you a little note on the desk. Maybe they come back and visit you in the school someday, and or you run into them in the grocery store, right? And they remind you. And it's in those moments that you think, yes, this is why I do what I do. Because at the end of the day, it is all about connecting with people, and you are making an impact and continue to change the trajectory of the lives of the people that you serve, because that's what you're doing. So we appreciate you. Frank Polar, we appreciate you. That's right.
Joe Frank's back in.
That's right. Got a chance to hang out with Joe and Tom this week, and it was awesome. So good to see you.
Yeah, it was good to see you.
Well, so thank you so much for what you do, buddy.
One of the things that I think is really important, though, Jimmy, with what you're saying, that I think we miss out on a lot is, the examples that you just gave, right? The examples, like you see people after they had you in class, or you see people that, they put a note on your desk or whatever the case may be. And you think about how often that happens, right? And how good you feel when that happens. But at the same time, it doesn't happen. It's not happening all the time. And so then we start to lose that process. I think that if you ask any teacher, you ask any educator why they do the work, they'll be able to tell you, right? They'll be able to tell you it's about kids and it's about, making connections and that kind of thing. But just knowing that doesn't help on a daily basis when you don't get a chance to see it. And I think what you're saying is it's nice to get that stuff, but how often are we giving that stuff? Because if we give more of that, it's easier to find joy in the work when you're helping other people find theirs. And so what are we doing? How intentional are we as the leaders in these spaces? We talk all the time about modeling. We're going to get what we model, but that's not just about like meetings or walking hallways or instructional practice. That's about what are we doing to put, to do exactly what you just said, putting positive notes, giving positive notes to people, making connections, having conversations. Like if we are often isolated in this position because we're the only person with our particular job title, right? And if that gets lonely and depressing and isolating, then it's that what helps that isolation is being intentional about the connections that you're making so you don't feel isolated in that spot. When you can be in spaces and make sure that people feel seen and heard, that's exactly what you're going to get back if you're putting that stuff out. But I don't know how intentional we are about that because of all the day-to-day checklist stuff that we have to get done. And I fear for a lot of, I think a lot of principals and superintendents and any district leaders or school leaders by any chance, or of any kind, we find ourselves in an isolating position because of the way that the job is situated. And all of a sudden we hope that it changes, but we don't do anything to change it. And then we wonder why it's not changing. And then we're like, well, it must be better somewhere else. I'm just going to go somewhere else and it's going to be better. But then it's not, because you haven't set up the capacity to lead and you haven't found a way to connect the joy to the work all the time. So you don't feel like you're isolated. And I think that's where people start to wonder, like, why would I even do this work? Because guess what's not changing? What's not changing is the hardship of the work. What's not changing are the parents that are upset about stuff. What's not changing is the political atmosphere that we're in. What's not changing are the people that get jacked up about something going on in the building that you're responsible for. That stuff is not changing. But if we can change our behavior on the other side of it, you still have to deal with that stuff. But it's not the only stuff that you have to deal with. And I think that's where we get lost a lot.
Yeah, that whole idea, right? Behavior is culture. So look at the behavior of the people in the organization. So Joe, you said something about the why, and if you ask people why they do it, they'll be very clear to why they do it. It was really interesting. I was listening to a young man speak this week in Georgia, And he really made a good point. And I started kind of reflecting on that. And he said, you know what? We talk about the why of the work, and certainly I know my why. But I think one thing we forget to talk about is that it's okay to change your why as you go through the experiences in your career. The experiences that you have will influence you, and that's okay to give people permission to influence you, because we're always evolving, right? And we go back to that again,
Right.
the whole evolution of school leadership or being a teacher in the classroom. It's okay sometimes for our why to continue to evolve. So one thing I would say to our listeners, if your why has changed over time, or you've added, or it's just maybe become a little bit more, I don't know, sophisticated, or maybe even more vulnerable, maybe share your why in here and how it's changed, not just your why, but where did it come from? Maybe it was here and now it's here, or why did it change? So that's one thing to kind of reflect on. And then you talked about the intentionality, and that is so important because I continue to reflect not only on my own work for a long time, but those individuals that we continue to work with today. And that is this issue of time. It still comes back to me, when we talk about best practices, we always say this, Joe, that what we're sharing, whether it's on the show or when we speak, it's not anything for the most part that's so earth shattering. Oh my goodness, I never thought of that. And every once in a while, there's an idea that say, yeah, I like that idea. But most of it's a reminder. It's a reminder for all of us. And when we talk to people, it's like, yeah, why did I stop doing that? Or why am I no longer doing that? Or I know that. And yet when we talk about best practices, at the end of the day, it's like, well, why don't we do these things?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's because they'll use the excuse, I don't have the time. And I think that's where we begin to reframe that and say, but wait a second, I'm not so sure that's true, right? If something happens right now, if you're listening to the show and something happens, you'll have time to go address whatever just happened, because it immediately moves up to the priority list, right? And so it's like a fire in the building, in the work that you do. Something happens, a kid pukes, a parent comes in angry, you get a call about something or whatever, or the boss calls. Right now, boom, you have time. And you'll drop everything you're doing to go address that. But the problem is when we drop everything and we go address that fire, then usually that means something over here we didn't do. And now we kind of have to go back and clean up the mess. And if that continues to happen over and over and over, then people get frustrated with that. And I think that's where morale begins to take an impact in our buildings, because everybody's scrambling. And that's not a good place to be, because typically when people are scrambling, they're elevated. So that's one thing I'd ask people to reflect on is, how are we lowering that stress level? What are our actions doing to contribute to that? Are we always at a level 10? In other words, are we always thinking, oh my goodness, we got to, we're running around 100 miles an hour? Or are we bringing more of a sense of calmness to the organization and bringing people together? Because I believe that together we can make anything happen. And so those are just some things, as you were talking just a little bit ago, about how the work we do impacts really the entire organization.
And we're responsible for what that looks like too for other people. That's a huge pressure right there. Is we're responsible for helping other people see that. And one of the things that I hear a lot, when you think about why people are stressed out or why people are overwhelmed or believe that they're overworked or whatever the case may be, is a lot of times it's initiative overload. Like we're expecting people to not only, so there's two things about initiative overload that I think are really important. And the first thing is that we as leaders in the building have to understand, are we putting that out there? Are we contributing to educator initiative overload? That's the first thing. But the second thing is on the other side of it. Are the people who are bringing the initiatives to, are they willing to give something up to take on something new? Or are they piling on because they believe that they can't get rid of the stuff that they're already doing? This happens to us a lot. Like you think about all the things that we pile on at the same time. If everything is the highest priority, then nothing is high priority. So we've got to give people license to be able to not only, and be involved in the initiative, but also take something off their own plate, A, but B, they've got to be willing to do it, right? They've got to be willing to say, okay, I can put this off to the side. Maybe this isn't a high priority. And so what ends up happening a lot, I believe, is that we put ourselves in a situation where we have initiatives or we're trying to help people out or move them forward. And if we're always pushing them, then they're always outside of their comfort zone. And I love stretching people and having them risk take and be out of their comfort zone. But if you're constantly out of your comfort zone, you never know where that neutral is, and you're always running hot. And I don't. That is, for me, that is not productive. It's not healthy at all. But we put our people in these positions a lot. So we can. The two pieces are we overwhelming them with what we're getting out there? But what are we doing to make sure that the other side is just as important? They have to be willing. The people that we lead have to be willing to be able to take stuff off their plate too. They have to be willing to say, well, I'm doing too much. What can I get rid of to make sure that we can continue to move forward?
Exactly. I appreciate that, Joe. I agree with that completely. You said a couple things again. Every time you say something, I just start reflecting on stuff. So thanks for sharing those great points. And I'm looking at Brian's comments and Kristen's comments and Jody's comments. Thank you guys for sharing that. And Jody, good to see you here. It was just a couple of weeks ago I got a chance to run into you in Virginia. So thank you so much for joining the show. Hey, listen, she talks about, again, this whole idea of, or excuse me, it's, let's see. Yeah, Jody talks about this whole, the why. Is that what she just said about, let me see here. Oh, it's up above. Okay. Getting caught up in the job, but forgetting about the work, but forgetting about the work. He encourages creating or operating mission statements, or why, for Matthew Portal. Is that what it says? I can't even see it. I need my glasses, Joe. But thank you, Jody. There you go. That helps on the screen. Thank you. Imagine how those things just pop up on the screen. Can you see that, Joe? How that pops up?
I got it. Very cute.
That's what I need. A little bit bigger font for me. So,
well, you are getting to be that age.
I'm not getting there, Joe. I am there.
Just, you are. 100%.
You'll understand someday. Double nickels, people. Double nickels. Five. You know what that means? Old.
Yeah.
I got my art card in the mail last summer. That just ended it for me. I was done. Just depressed.
Do you know my parents?
Yeah, it feels like it should be. But this initiative overload, right? Initiative fatigue. And you shared a couple things just in terms of how we keep adding to the plates. And then I go to Jody's comment and how that work, eventually people just kind of lose their passion for that work. And it does become a job a little bit, and it becomes grinding. We're not as excited as we once were. The job's just wearing down on us. And Jody, one thing I would share too is, we've talked about this before, is just that why is such an important word, because it isn't just about the why of the work that we do, but there's also thinking about the why people behave the way they behave. And those are kind of those experiences that people have. So when you see people behave in a certain way, if we can reframe it and see it a little different and say, hey, you know what? Well, why are they doing those things? I think it allows us to slow down a little bit and pause and just see it a little differently, maybe bring grace to people, maybe not be so critical or so judgmental, or even worse yet, prevents us from labeling people.
Right.
Because again, all people do want to be great at what they do. And especially at one time when they first got hired, we knew they wanted to be great. That's why we hired them, remember? And then the whole idea of the why of what you're talking about, Joe, is why are we doing this initiative? Why the change? And again, I think if people understand that why, and we bring clarity to that, and has purpose, and it aligns with our school improvement plan, our mission, our vision, whatever, and we give people a voice in that, I think we get a better result when we begin to drive that initiative. And then you said something that I hear all the time, and it was just reminded me again this couple of weeks ago, is that we have to be careful in leaders that we don't continue to go back to the same people over and over.
Right.
Because the downside of that is obviously we wear them down. We exhaust them because we're going to what we would say our best people, but unintentionally, without even noticing it, sometimes what we do create are more issues, because not only do we exhaust them, but I believe even our best people will eventually keep score and say, but wait a second, why am I killing myself? Why am I up every night so late? Why am I giving up every weekend? And yet there are other people in the organization that don't seem to do any of those things.
Yeah.
And then it provides not only an issue of resentment, or creates an issue of resentment, but it also creates an issue of resentment on those that aren't being asked. In other words, why do they keep asking them and they never ask me? And then over here, where it's, why do you keep asking me and never ask them? And then what happens is the people that don't get asked, not only do they resent the people that are getting asked, they also resent the leader for never asking them. So there's all these these issues that it creates, and it creates that chatter throughout our organizations, and then eventually hurts our morale, which eventually hurts our culture. So again, my friends, that's why leadership is so important. There's so many things to think about. And I believe it always goes back to us, that the leader of the building is responsible for setting the tone for the culture and climate of the organization. But I don't think we're responsible for all of it, because I'm not going to own everybody's morale in the building, but I do contribute to that if I'm not careful. So I have to be really intentional, as we said at the beginning of the show. How am I creating or not creating some of these issues in my building? And that's what I would ask our listeners to kind of reflect on.
Well, I think the other piece of it that almost gets lost in the shuffle is it's not even just about, well, it's not about the, I don't want to say it's not about the culture, but it's also about the logistics of what you do too. Because I remember when I started, I felt like I needed to be in charge of everything, right? So if I'm in charge of everything and somebody comes and asks me to do something, I'm like, okay, so here's how it needs to be done, right? And then I'm thinking, well, if it's not being going to be done like exactly the way that I want it, then I'm like, forget it, I'll just do it myself. And so I would just do it on my own. So now I'm running myself into the ground because I know how I want it to look. And it's just easier for me to do it than it is to try to help and let somebody else do it for me, because it's not going to look the way that I want it. So what ended up happening was the people that just wanted stuff done, that they just wanted to get it off of their plate, they would come and tell me that they needed some help because they knew that I was going to do it. But the converse was just as true. The people that wanted to be led, that wanted to be helped, that wanted to get better, they stopped asking me for help because they knew I was just going to do it. And if I was just going to do it, they weren't going to get any better at it. So why would they ask if I was just going to take it over? So now you've taken the best people, the people that want to get better, that want to improve, and you've silenced them because you're doing all the work. And now you've enhanced the voices of the people that don't want to do the work. They just want it done because you're doing it for them, and you're running yourself into the ground. So you're 0 for 3 at that point. You're not building leaders. You're enhancing the voices of those who don't want to invest as much, and you're crushing yourself along the way. So even though that the work might not look the way that you wanted it to, at the same time, you've now built up capacity, and it probably looks better. What I found out was it looks better than if I was going to do it, because there was another perspective that I didn't have. So we got to give ourselves license to give some of that stuff away too, and have some grace for ourselves as well.
Yeah. I'm looking at the comments, Joe. I love Tara's comment, right? She's talking about, I've learned to kind of understand, am I running to the fire or can I just walk to the fire? And that's a great point, Tara, because again, the more we run, we tend to elevate those around us. And so how can we be a little bit more intentional and saying, recognizing, okay, there's a fire. And then a reminder is, well, maybe while I go, I think part of it is we see a fire and our first reaction is I want to extinguish that fire. Why? Because I don't want someone to get hurt. But going back to kind of what you said, Joe, is what if I looked at it differently? Maybe it really isn't, I guess there's different levels of fire, right? The intensity of the fire. Is it this type of fire or is it this fire? And if it's this fire, maybe I can walk to it. And maybe I don't need to extinguish it right away. Maybe I can walk into the fire. And more importantly, at that moment, what we call work on the people. In other words, teach in that moment. So we help other people become better versions of themselves so they don't keep putting themselves in the fire. But again, it goes back to earlier. But if we convince ourselves we don't have time, we just want to extinguish it and move on to the next fire. Right. And we can't do that. They stuck in this crazy cycle, right? And so we begin to think about it that way. And then I love Jody's comments, and thank you, Sue. And yes, Mary, yes, double nickels, own it, girl, love it, absolutely. So I'm loving the comments that we're seeing here, what we're talking about. And so thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on here on the show this morning. We really appreciate it. But Joe, this whole idea of building capacity, I know for a fact when I first started, I really did think I could do everything. And I wanted to do everything. And somebody made the comment earlier about this servant leadership. And absolutely, there is this mindset that we're there to take care. If you're a teacher, you're there to take care of the children. If you're a principal, you're there to take care of your staff. And I love that mindset. But if we're always serving other people, to your point earlier, Joe, when do we take time to serve ourselves? So that's the reminder again, yes. But the question is, why do we believe we have to do all that? Or why are we doing all that? And it does go back to the notion is maybe it's because we aren't doing a very good job of building capacity. Or maybe I actually like fixing things because it makes me feel good, or I feel better after I do that. Or for me, it was a little ego thing, or maybe I felt like I want to be like the hero and save everybody. And yet at the same time, I'm not even seeing in the moment what it's doing to me. And I think that's a reminder to all leaders is how do we get other people to allow us not to become those individuals, because we can't do this crazy job all by ourselves. And so, yeah, I was just reflecting on that, this whole idea of, Joe, you talked about the people that come to you, and sometimes I think we just have to see it differently and ask ourselves, why do they keep coming to us, or why don't they ever come to us?
Right.
And I think sometimes
that's important.
There's something in the relationship there, right? Either people feel comfortable with us or people don't.
Right.
And if people don't, then is that because we haven't done a good enough job of building the trust, investing time in these people? They don't feel comfortable talking to us. And so there's always a constant reflection. And we know that with leadership, we're constantly having to reflect, because that's the only way we can get better. And we have to manage. I don't care whether it's you're managing 60 people, 90 people, or you're a larger organization, you're managing 200 people. Those are all the people you have to learn their stories, where they all have to learn one. And I think that's why Joe and I do the show, is to give all of you grace, to remind you, yes, keep just getting better. And that's all we can ever ask of anybody, a student, a teacher, a principal, or a superintendent. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And how about not trying to do this alone? And I think if you can find ways to, I think the challenge that I gave everybody this morning was that the concept is really about just being in other people's space, right? Like you don't have to. I think sometimes we get into this thing where when we say that we've got to connect with colleagues and, we don't want people to feel isolated. I think there's this thought that you need to go next door and like check on everybody. Like, hey, how are you doing today? Are you okay? You're okay. You don't need to do that. You just need to be in the space, because if you're in the space and you're helping people laugh and smile and think and feel and all of that stuff, now all of a sudden you get more comfortable, and that brings everybody back the next day. It's not about like, you don't have to have this philosophical deep dive to make sure that everybody can, take a look at, how they got here and what's the philosophy of what. Just make them laugh, right? Or smile, or make sure that they feel seen or heard. And then not only will they feel better, but you're going to feel better because you're putting that out there, which is how we started this whole conversation, Jimmy. What are we putting out there? How intentional are we about being in the space, or having that conversation, or making sure that people feel seen and heard? But that doesn't mean that you have to like go and have like a deep conversation with them about life or their journey. Right? Just make them smile. My gosh, make them smile and make them laugh, and that makes them feel. But it also makes me feel better when I can do that. When I can be in a hallway and make somebody laugh or smile. Guess what? Guess where I'm going the next day? I'm going right back there, because I felt good too. That's why I never talk to you. You don't laugh my jokes.
I'm laughing right now because I was like, I was right with you. I was ready to give you an amen, brother. And then you go, and it makes me feel good.
Well, don't you want to feel good? I mean, seriously.
I know, but it's the way you said it made me laugh.
I'm gonna do it. We take enough shots, man. Like, why wouldn't you want to feel better about that spot? It's not just about the leader in the building. It's about the second grade teachers or the 8th grade teachers or the high school English teachers doing the same thing. Go next door, make somebody smile and laugh, tell a joke, tell a bad joke, whatever. I don't care. But at least, like, just be there, man.
I'll tell the people on the show this morning that I spent 24 hours with Joe this week, and not one time did we go into a deep conversation about anything. But I will tell you one thing: this guy always makes me laugh.
That's right.
Love you,
I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it.
So, hey, listen, great reminders, Joe Sanfilippo. Thank you so much. We're talking about leadership, people, about culture. How do we influence the people in our organization? That's leadership. Continue to focus on building and growing and developing and inspiring your people to be great. Remember, it's all about relationships. And at the end of the day, can't outsource relationships to somebody else. We cultivate the relationships in our buildings because we are leaders, my friends. So thank you so much for joining us on the show this week. We hope you join us again next week. That's enough of our nonsense for about 30 minutes. And Joe Sanfilippo, last word for you, buddy.
All right, man. just take care of each other. Everybody, just find a way to take care of each other. Have that extra conversation. Be in that space one more time this week, because I promise you, you're gonna feel better about being there. They're gonna feel better about it. You're gonna feel better about it too, and it's gonna bring you back the next day. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care. Love you.